It's 1 a.m. at Michigan State's practice facility, and the rest of the team has been gone for hours. The lights in the weight room are dark, the doors are locked, and the staff has even padlocked the handles. They've done everything they can to keep him out, but inside, Rod Brind'Amour is still working. That relentless obsession fueled one of the most prolific yet overlooked careers in NHL history. For years, critics questioned if a resume featuring over 1,100 points, 2 Selke trophies, and a Stanley Cup as captain was truly enough for the Hockey Hall of Fame. But in 2026, Brind'Amour silenced the debate completely by doing something no other individual in the league's expansion era has ever achieved. And it leaves the hockey world with only one question: how much longer can the Hall of Fame keep him out? To understand the man who would eventually redefine a franchise, we have to go back to 1988. Drafted 9th overall by the St. Louis Blues, a young Rod Brind'Amour opted to play a year at Michigan State before making the leap to the pros. It was here in East Lansing that the legend of his work ethic was born. Most players treat college hockey as a stepping stone, but Rod Brind'Amour treated it like a personal proving ground. It became routine for him to finish a grueling hockey game and march straight into the weight room for a brutal workout. His obsession genuinely concerned the coaching staff, forcing head coach Ron Mason to resort to those padlocks night after night. It was here that his relentless pursuit of physical perfection cemented a nickname that would follow him for the rest of his career: Rod the Bod. When his college season ended in the spring of 1989, he immediately joined the Blues during their Stanley Cup playoff run. Dropped right into Game 5 of the division semifinals against the Minnesota North Stars, Brind'Amour skated onto the ice for his debut and scored a goal on his very first shot in the National. By the time his official rookie season wrapped up in 1990, he had proven the debut wasn't a fluke. He racked up 27 points in his first 24 games, finished third on the Blues roster with 26 goals, and secured a spot in the NHL All-Rookie team. He had rapidly established himself as a rising star in St. Louis, but just as he was settling in, the business side of the NHL completely altered his path. Just before the start of the 91-92 season, Brind'Amour was traded to the Philadelphia Flyers. It was in the city of brotherly love that Brind'Amour truly forged his identity. He evolved from a reliable offensive threat into one of the most elite suffocating shutdown centers in the entire NHL. That legendary conditioning paid massive dividends as Rod Brind'Amour became the ultimate Iron Man, setting a Flyers franchise record by playing in 484 consecutive games. He earned an All-Star nod in '92 and naturally stepped into a core leadership role on the team. He served as an alternate captain, stepping up to wear the C whenever Eric Lindros was out of the lineup. By 1997, Brind'Amour's leadership helped push Philadelphia all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. He was finally on the verge of lifting the very trophy he had obsessively been training for since college. But the hockey gods can be cruel, as the Flyers ran into a juggernaut, the legendary Detroit Red Wings. It was a crushing blow for a player who had poured every ounce of himself into the game, and unfortunately for Brind'Amour, it wouldn't be the last time Detroit shattered his championship dreams. In January of 2000, a blockbuster trade shook the NHL. Brind'Amour was sent down south to the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for Keith Primeau. At the time, the Hurricanes were a franchise still trying to establish their identity. They needed a cultural anchor, and Rod Brind'Amour provided just that. By 2002, his impact was undeniable. Anchoring the famous BBC line alongside Bates Battaglia and Eric Cole, he propelled Carolina on a miraculous playoff run to their first ever Stanley Cup final in franchise history. But waiting for them, like a ghost from his past, were the Detroit Red Wings. The familiar heartbreak struck again, leaving Brind'Amour on the losing end of hockey's ultimate prize for a second time. The turning point finally arrived before the 2005-2006 season when Brind'Amour was officially named captain of the Carolina Hurricanes. Wearing the C, he completely took over. He won the Selke Trophy as the league's best defensive forward and finished 10th in Hart Trophy voting for league MVP. But most importantly, he willed his team back to the Stanley Cup final, and this time, he would not be denied. When the Hurricanes captured their first ever championship, the years of obsession and near misses finally boiled over. As NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman prepared to present the Stanley Cup, Brind'Amour didn't even wait for the handoff. He excitedly skated over and grabbed the trophy directly off the table. It was a raw, unfiltered moment of pure passion that actually forced the NHL to change its award presentation protocols forever. After years of agonizing defeat, Brind'Amour had finally done it, but this was only the beginning. The years following the championship run brought more milestones, with Brind'Amour achieving his 1,000th career NHL point in late 2006, along with scoring his 400th career goal and capturing a second consecutive Selke trophy in 2007. But in professional sports, time eventually catches up with everyone. In January 2010, in a highly controversial midseason move by head coach Paul Maurice, Rod Brind'Amour was replaced as captain by Eric Stahl.
I don't know that he would do that again, because I think, I learned a lot from that. I learned that's not how you treat your guys that do it right.
For a player who had poured his absolute soul into the franchise, the decision felt profoundly disrespectful. It was a massive emotional hit that abruptly altered the final chapter of his career. At the end of that season, after an astonishing 1,484 NHL games and 1,184 points, Rod the Bod officially hung up his skates. At the time of his retirement, he sat 18th in all-time NHL games played. Though his playing days were over, the respect he commanded across the league was undeniable. In February 2011, the Hurricanes raised his number 17 jersey to the rafters, becoming just the third number retired in franchise history. Fittingly, the ceremony took place before a game against the Flyers, who were then coached by Peter Laviolette, the man who had coached Brind'Amour to the Cup in 2006. A few years later, the Flyers paid their own tribute, inducting him into the Philadelphia Flyers Hall of Fame. But Brind'Amour had no intention of leaving the game behind. He immediately transitioned into Carolina's front office as a director of forwards development and assistant coach. He was about to build an entirely new legacy. On May 8, 2018, the Carolina Hurricanes made a franchise-altering decision. They officially hired Rod Brind'Amour as their head coach. The impact was instant, and in his very first season behind the bench, Brind'Amour snapped a decade-long playoff drought, steering the Canes all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. By April of 2021, he became the first head coach in franchise history to lead the team to the playoffs in 3 consecutive seasons, ultimately winning the Jack Adams Award as the NHL's top coach.
Thanks, Brian. I guess it's never too late to say thank you, and I wanted to thank you because you're my first coach in this league over 30 years ago, and you taught me something that I still think I use every day, and that is to never take a day in this league for granted or take a shift in this league for granted.
Brind'Amour quickly established himself as the most universally respected coach in the entire league by players, peers, and fans alike. He wasn't a coach who just barked orders from the bench. He still lived by the exact same legendary work ethic he had as a player. His dominance compounded year after year. In December of 2024, Brind'Amour etched his name into the record books by becoming the fastest coach to 300 wins in NHL history. Reaching the milestone in just 488 games was undeniable proof that his uncompromising standard had officially turned Carolina into a regular season giant. But what truly separated him was his psychological approach to motivation. Nothing encapsulates his genius better than the story of the cinder block. For 5 straight years, Brind'Amour had his players lifting a 35-pound cinder block in the gym. What he intentionally kept as a secret from them was the exact significance of that number. 35 pounds is the precise weight of the Stanley Cup. Every time they hoisted that block, without them even realizing it, he was subconsciously preparing his players' bodies and minds to one day lift hockey's ultimate prize. And as the 2025-26 season got underway, that mental preparation was about to face its biggest test. Despite all the early coaching success, a heavy shadow loomed over the franchise. As the years went on, a narrative began to haunt Carolina. They couldn't get over the hump. Critics pointed to their brutal track record deep in the playoffs. Since their 2006 Cup win, the Hurricanes had gone a staggering 1-16 in Eastern Conference final games. Critics loudly argued that Brind'Amour's high-volume, aggressive system was fundamentally flawed for the grueling nature of the postseason. The national media claimed the roster lacked true game-breaking superstars and that their goaltending simply wasn't elite enough to steal a championship. The pressure was mounting for the team, and they needed to silence the critics once and for all and cement their legacy as a championship-caliber team. Just as he had to overcome years of agonizing heartbreak to lift the cup as a player, Brind'Amour now faced the exact same hurdle as a coach. But instead of crumbling under the weight of history, Carolina turned those heartbreaking experiences into fuel. During the 2025-26 Stanley Cup playoffs, the Hurricanes became an unstoppable force. They swept the first 2 rounds, leading to an 11-day break after eliminating the Flyers, the longest postseason layoff for any NHL team since 1919. But waiting for them on the other side of that break was the one round that had become a graveyard for this team, the Eastern Conference Final. After a rough start in Game 1, it looked like history was about to repeat itself. But instead of folding, the Hurricanes imposed their will. They put on a suffocating performance, finally conquering the curse by rattling off 4 straight wins against the Montreal Canadiens. At long last, Brind'Amour had led Carolina to the Prince of Wales Trophy as their head coach. In what many claim is the greatest Stanley Cup final series of all time, the Canes went to war with the Vegas Golden Knights. It was the perfect proving ground for Brind'Amour's punishing system. Every 35-pound cinder block hoisted in the gym, and every agonizing playoff exit culminated in this moment. Leaving absolutely everything on the ice, the Hurricanes defeated Vegas 4-2, capturing the franchise's 2nd Stanley Cup and setting off pure pandemonium in Raleigh, North Carolina.
The Carolina Hurricanes have won the Stanley Cup for the 2nd time.
The Hurricanes tore through the postseason with a dominant 16-3 record, marking the fewest losses by a Stanley Cup champion since 1980. In one fell swoop, these bunch of jerks silenced years of criticism and hate, becoming world champions once again. With that victory, Rod Brind'Amour entered an exclusive, almost mythical echelon of hockey lore. He became one of only 7 people to win the Cup with the same team as a player and a head coach, and the first and only person to do so in the league's expansion era. Not since Montreal's Toe Blake in 1956 has someone won championships with the same franchise as both captain and coach. The statistics behind his tenure are almost difficult to process. He has either played or coached in all but 2 of the Hurricanes' 104 playoff wins. He currently holds the highest points and win percentages in NHL history among head coaches, and his raw win totals are just an unbelievable stat. With 378 wins, he ranks 49th overall in league history despite only coaching 616 games. To put that in perspective, he's the only coach in the top 50 in wins with fewer than 700 games coached. Which brings us back to where we started, the Hockey Hall of Fame. For years, people debated if his resume was truly enough, but the 2026 championship fundamentally changed the conversation. You were looking at one of the most complete hockey legacies in the history of the sport. Over 1,400 games and 1,100 points, 2 Selke trophies, a Stanley Cup as a captain, and now a historic Cup run as a head coach that completely shattered every narrative used against him. Rod Brind'Amour has spent nearly 4 decades outworking the doubt. The Hall of Fame might continue to snub him, but a plaque in Toronto won't change who he is or what he means to Carolina. He is the very definition of what the Hall of Fame represents: dedication, leadership, and a lifetime of excellence, and nobody embodies that standard more than Rod Brind'Amour. Here's to Rod the Bod.